I'm going to do a quick talk on Dr. Wilhelm Reich. Um, Brilliant man. He was a student of Sigmund Freud who went on to develop a study of orgone energy. He died in prison by the federal government who tried to cover up his discovery. Um, I'll read a quote from Reich that says, "Scientific matters can only be clarified by prolonged, faithful, bona fide observations and friendly exchange of opinion, never by litigation. Man's right to know, to learn, to inquire, to make bona fide errors, to investigate human emotions must all be by all means be safe. If the word freedom should ever be more than an empty political slogan," which we know in America, freedom is a political empty slogan. Wilhelm Reich died in jail because he studied orgone. Now let's move on. So now, so we're gonna. So here's something called Orgonite. Now, orgone is the form of energy that Reich studied. Orgonite is basically when you take either man-made or natural uh, substances. And now, in the case of shungite, is a natural substance, a rock. Now, they say that it basically produces orgone energy. I, I, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but for the sake, we'll just leave that there for this. Now, organite would be like, for instance, when you take substances like crystal, metal, and put them together. Sometimes you also need natural stuff like cotton and wool, and you put them together to form what would be called orgonite, which is a man-made, basically compilation of substances that then we call orgonite. And they call it that because they say it produces orgone energy. Now, what I find in my study, I've been studying orgone and orgonite and Wilhelm Reich for about 12 years. And I'll show you a little bit of what I found. Now, so what I found is that when you create orgonite, when you compile these, create these devices, so to speak, or um, some cases pendants, right? This is a shungite pendant. Um, I don't necessarily know if it produces orgone, but I'll tell you what I found. So you create these pucks. You can create pyramids, right? Of orgonite, which is just, like I said, a compilation of you compile these different materials like crystals and metals, and in some cases cotton, wool, things like that. Now, what happens is these um, pucks or pyramids or pendants, what they'll do is they absorb electromagnetic radiation, right? Now I'll show you how. And so, but there's a lot of people will talk about using pendulums and things, ice, water, all kinds of shit for testing for the viability of your orgonite, right? Now, what I found in like 12 years of study, somebody suggested EMF, right? EMF or Geiger counters. And I found that to be viable. Now, you can download this app, right, on your phone, on a phone if you have a certain sensor in your phone. And what it does is this app will record, it will pick up electromagnetic frequency, right? It basically turns your phone into a EMF sensor, right? Detector. Now, so I'm going to talk about Orgonite, how to make it, how it develops naturally in shungite. Like this is just a piece of stone made into a pendant or puck, right? and I'll talk a little bit about that now. Uh, so, and I'll show you some of what I found now. So, what I found is that, and also they say shape matters. And what I found is that it does it work? Is it a pseudoscience? Is it viable? I think it is. I think it's not a pseudoscience, and I do think it's viable. I think Reich was onto something, and I think that's why they locked him up. Um, and I'll show you some of what I've found that makes sense to save you some time, as opposed to a lot of what is said that is total bullshit, right? And it's not scientific. If you can't reproduce something and you can't measure it, like pendulum shit like that, doesn't work. You need devices. We live in a modern era. We need devices that you can record and measure fluctuations in, I guess, what we would consider waves, right? Like now, or energy, right? Not just our opinions or what we think. So pendulums and stuff like that is total bullshit. Now, so I'll show you why EMF readers or Geiger counters make sense. Now, so what I also found in making Orgonite, right, that you want to stick to Wilhelm Reich's basic blueprint for producing, for orgone creation, right? It's going to be the most powerful. And what he did was, and you can find any of his books online. I recommend any of his books. He layered, for instance, like different materials. So he would layer like metal, cotton, metal, and basically just metal and cotton, like metal, cotton, metal, cotton, metal, cotton. And then he would layer those materials to make his layers of orgonite material, right? Or um, orgone capturing material that he would then mold into devices or boxes for people to sit in to heal themselves. And so now when you're making, what I found is that when you're making some so-called orgonite, what works, what doesn't. Now these seem to work actually. I bought these off of eBay, relatively cheap. These are pyramid. This is a puck, well, orgonite puck, and a couple of orgonite pucks. Right? They call them tower busters. And this is a piece of shungite, right? A rock that has would be a natural form of orgonite, right? But it's called shungite. And the reason why this works, now I'll show you what else works. Now I added a magnet to my orgonite tower. I just kind of glued it to the bottom because I like to put magnets in my orgonite. Now, something I started about 10 years ago. Now, what this didn't have it, so I put it in it. But I make orgonite with magnets. The reason why, and I just did it because somebody said it, but then I decided to test it. Now let's just run through a test real quick. So I'll show you some things real quick. So now in this EMF reader, we'll take a look at this. Right, let's move all the orgone away. This is a powerful neodymium magnet on the bottom of my orgonite pyramid. Now let's take a look at something. Now, as you can see, you can turn this on and off. It's off. Let's turn it back on. Now let's move it in close to get it close to the sensor. Let's see what happens, right? See if the camera will pick that up. Now what we see is as it gets closer to the magnet, it goes off the fucking scale, right? So what we find is that, right, it goes off the scale. So what we find is that magnets, powerful magnets, will produce or replicate electromagnetic radiation or electromagnetic, like Wi-Fi signals, etc. Right? We find that they have that effect on EMF readers, right? Because this is an EMF application that reader, right? It measures electromagnetic frequencies, etc. Right? Radiation. So we find that we see that powerful magnets will set that off, right? And basically will replicate, like the dangers of, as they say, Wi-Fi or, power lines, et cetera, right? Which can be measured by this device, right? Or app. Now, so since we see that that works, now let's move it back. We see it backs off, right? It's in the green, safe, goes down. Our readings are low, right? Now let's do it again, right? So we'll do it again just to replicate, right? We'll do a pull back, we pull back, let's pull back, boom, right? So we see that as the sensor gets closer, right? Hopefully this camera is picking that up. You can see it's off the charts, right? Now, now let's take a look at something. Let's take a piece of, now I've done this I've used other objects. I've used silver. I've used, just random shit, tape, anything, because you have to have some, I guess, placebo, right? Or whatever, right? So I've used random stuff to see if it's any different. And nothing works, no matter what put in front of this, it does, it'll still, you know, as you can see, right? It doesn't block it. You can put any kind of random thing in front of there. I've used a silver bar, I used different things, which is metal, silver is metal. So just to see what would happen. And it's resistant to EMF radiation, but eventually it goes up. Now, and so to save time, I'm not going to do that again. Now let's go with the shungite, right? Let's take a look at something. So if you take the shungite, so let's take the shungite per se. Right? So let's put a piece of shungite here. Now we see the reaction that the sensor has. Now let's take the shungite, right? And see if we get the same reaction. What happens? Notice when we move the sensor close to it with the shungite, it kind of blocks it. Now it's going up a little bit, right? It's not a big piece of shungite. It's not kind of big enough. So boom, that's what I wanted to see. Now you notice what happened. It went up and then it shot straight back down to normal. See that? So what happens, now let me explain to you what's happening. What I found is once the electromagnetic waves start to hit the orgonite, in this case shungite, right? Which is natural type of orgonite slash, rock. The electromagnetic waves that go through the rock activate the rock and vibrate the rock in a way that it creates a sponge effect that then will cause the rock to start to, basically absorb the electromagnetic frequency. It turns into a sponge, as you can see, right? So I showed you the effects of the powerful magnet and the shungite, and then you see what happened to the sensor. What happens is that rock vibrates, right? The electromagnetic frequency vibrates the rock. Once it starts to vibrate at a certain frequency, right? Everything's frequency, vibration, right? And waves. So once those waves go through and vibrate, right? Hopefully that shows up, right? Hopefully that shows up. So once those waves vibrate, right? The rock then vibrates at a frequency, hits a certain frequency. It starts to absorb the surrounding waves like a sponge. See? That's the effect that I wanted you to see, the scientific effect. You see? Now, let's pull back. Man. Sometimes And I also suspect that this marble top is actually radioactive or something because I noticed that it's setting off. I don't know, for some reason, it's setting my sensor off. I'm not sure why. But anyway, so now let's go with another material. Let's see if we can get the same effect. So we tested the shungite and we see the effect, right? So let's test the Orgonite puck that was created. I got this on eBay for a few bucks. Now let's see what happens, right? Now, so well, let's before we put that there, let's do this. Let's move this up, right? So we'll observe that. As you can see, look. You see what happens when the sensor. Look at that, off the chart, right? Off the chart. So we see what's happening, right? Now let's move it back. It goes right down. See properly, away from the powerful magnet on the bottom of that orgonite that was created, right? Now we see that the magnet replicates EMF, right? Which is supposedly is only supposed to come off of like electronic devices, but we see that powerful magnets give off the same type of energy. Now let's take this. Oops. Let's take this puck, this orgonite puck, which was created with metal and different epoxy, right? Different layers of metal and epoxy. So I'll put that there. Let's see what kind of effect it has on our EMF reader. So we saw what happened. So let's move the EMF reader closer than close. Let's see what happens. Now watch. Let's see what happens. Boom. Look what happened. It spiked, and then what did it do? Went right to normal. Look where I'm at. Oops. Right, look at that. So it spiked up. Once it started vibrating, right, at a certain level, you can see that it picked it up, but then all of a sudden, it totally dropped to normal, right? It measures in the micro Tesla units. Tesla. So one of my heroes, my scientific heroes, along with Wilhelm Reich. I think if you study Tesla and Reich, you'll start to learn some of the secrets of the universe, which are so simple. Sometimes they escape. They go right over people's heads. Now look what happened. You see, it works. It absorbs the EMF. You see, and then basically like a sponge, it just absorbs it. You see. Now let's move that away. Let's move it away again from the magnet, the powerful magnet. And I'm gonna explain that magnet in a minute. Now let's take a look again. Let's see if we can get that. Let's see what happens. Boom, look at that. Let's move it close. 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 Boom. See? And it doesn't drop. See that? See that? All right. Let's move it back. See that? Boom. There we go. Drops to normal. Now, let's use this other part. Put that there. Put this there. Try to do this while I'm holding the camera.